In the days when giants walked the earth, and the sons of God took the daughters of men as wives, when violence filled the world, and every imagination of man's heart was only evil continually, when the Creator's heart was grieved that he had made mankind upon the face of the earth, there lived a man whose name would echo through every generation until the end of time. Picture, if you will, a world so ancient that the very air breathed differently. The earth was young then, still close to the garden's memory, yet already far from paradise. The sun rose over lands where no city had yet been built, where rivers ran pure and unnamed, where creatures great and small moved in harmonies, not yet broken by the sound of war. In this world of mystery and growing darkness, there was one man who walked differently than his neighbors. While others pursued the desires of their hearts without restraint, while violence and corruption spread like wildfire across the face of the earth, there was one who found grace in the eyes of the Lord. His name was Noah, a righteous man, a blameless man in his generation, a man who walked with God, just as his great-grandfather Enoch had walked with God before he was taken. In a world drowning in its own wickedness, Noah remained afloat on the waters of divine favor. Imagine him in the cool of the evening, this preacher of righteousness, lifting his voice to heaven while his neighbors pursued their pleasures. Picture his weathered hands raised in worship while others raised their hands in violence. See his eyes, clear and focused on eternal things, while the eyes of his generation were clouded with temporal desires. For 120 years, the Spirit of God would strive with mankind. 120 years of divine patience, of mercy extended, of warnings proclaimed. And at the center of this cosmic drama stood Noah, keeper of the covenant, guardian of the future, architect of hope upon the waters of judgment. Little did he know, as he tended his family and proclaimed God's righteousness, that he would become the father of a new world. Little did he imagine that his faithful obedience would preserve not only his own household, but every breathing creature upon the face of the earth. The story you're about to hear is not merely the tale of one man's sea survival. It is the epic of humanity, second beginning of God's faithful love, triumphing over judgment of an ark that would become the vessel of divine grace. Rest now, and let your mind drift back to that ancient time when the world was young and the voice of the Almighty could still be heard clearly by those whose hearts were turned toward heaven. And the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The gentle morning mist that had once watered the ground now seemed to carry whispers of corruption. The very stones cried out against the violence that filled the land. But God's eyes, those eyes that see all things, that search the hearts and know the thoughts, found one man, one family, in whom his Spirit could still dwell. Like a single candle burning in a vast darkness, Noah's righteousness pierced the growing gloom of his generation. Feel the weight of that divine gaze resting upon this faithful man. Imagine Noah in his fields, perhaps tending his crops or caring for his animals, when suddenly the voice of the Eternal broke through the ordinary sounds of his day. Not the voice of thunder that would later shake Mount Sinai, but the intimate voice of a friend speaking to his friend, the voice that had walked with Adam in the cool of the day. Noah, the very speaking of his name, carried worlds of meaning. For this was not merely a calling, but a choosing, not merely an instruction, but an invitation into the heart of God's eternal purpose. The end of all flesh is come before me, the Lord declared, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Picture Noah receiving these words. His heart, already grieved by the corruption he witnessed daily, now understanding the full weight of divine judgment. The God who had created the earth in love was preparing to uncreate it in justice. The same waters that had been gathered together on the third day of creation would now be unleashed to cover the highest mountains. Yet in the very breath that spoke of judgment, mercy was interwoven. For the Lord continued, "But with thee will I establish my covenant." A covenant. The first time this sacred word appears in the chronicles of God's relationship with mankind. A binding promise, an unbreakable commitment, a bridge of grace spanning the chasm between holy justice and human need. Noah, this righteous man, would become the keeper of that covenant, the guardian of God's future plans for the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood, came the divine blueprint. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. Can you see it in your mind's eye? This massive vessel taking shape in Noah's thoughts as the dimensions unfold before him? 300 cubits in length, longer than a modern football field. 50 cubits in breadth, 30 cubits in height. A structure so enormous that even today it would dwarf most buildings, designed not for beauty, but for purpose, not for speed, but for survival. And so began the great work. Picture Noah returning to his household, his wife, his 3 sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. 8 souls in all. 8 people who would carry the future of humanity through the coming deluge. Imagine the conversation that evening as Noah shared the divine commission with his family. The awe in their eyes as they grasped the magnitude of what lay ahead. The questions that must have filled their minds. How does one build a vessel for worldwide catastrophe? How does one prepare for judgment on such a scale? But Noah was a man of faith, and faith requires no understanding, only obedience. When God speaks, the faithful respond. When the Almighty commands, the righteous comply. The sound of axes began to ring through the morning air. The crash of mighty trees falling echoed across the landscape. Day by day, the pile of gopher wood grew higher. From sunrise to sunset, the family labored together, cutting and shaping, measuring and fitting, building something that had never been built before. The neighbors surely came to watch. Picture them gathering at the edge of Noah's property, scratching their heads in bewilderment. Old Noah's lost his mind, they might have whispered. Building a boat where there's no sea. Preparing for a flood when rain has never fallen from the sky. The gentle mist that watered the earth had always been sufficient. What need was there for such elaborate precautions? But Noah preached while he worked. His hammer blows were sermons. His saw strokes were warnings. Repent, his labor declared to all who would listen. Turn from your wickedness. The judgment of God is coming, but his mercy is still available. 120 years. Can you fathom such patience? 120 years of divine mercy extended to a rebellious world. 120 years of Noah's faithful witness. 120 years for hearts to soften, for minds to change, for souls to turn back to their Creator. Yet the world continued in its corruption. The sons of God continued to take the daughters of men as wives, creating a race of giants, of Nephilim, whose very existence was an abomination before the Lord. Violence continued to fill the earth. The thoughts of men's hearts remained evil continually. Slowly, gradually, the ark took shape. Beam by beam, plank by plank, the vessel of salvation rose from the earth like a great wooden mountain. The rooms were divided according to God's specifications. The window was set in place. The door was hung on its mighty hinges. Every cubit measured according to the divine blueprint. And as the ark neared completion, God spoke again to his faithful servant. Come thou and all thy house into the ark. He said, For thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Notice the tenderness in that divine invitation. Not, go into the ark, but come into the ark. The Lord himself would be there, present in that vessel of salvation, dwelling with those who trusted in his mercy. But the ark would carry more than human passengers. Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female. And of beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female. Of fowls also of the air by sevens, the male and the female, to keep seed alive upon the face of all the earth. Picture the great gathering. From the forests and fields they came, drawn by an instinct planted deep within their creation. The mighty elephants with their thundering steps, the graceful giraffes stretching their necks toward heaven, the lions and the lambs, the eagles and the sparrows, the cattle and the creeping things. 2 by 2 they came, and 7 by 7, as if answering a call that only they could hear. The God who had formed them from the dust of the ground was now calling them to safety through the vessel he had prepared. What a sight it must have been! A parade of creation, flowing toward the ark like rivers flowing toward the sea. Noah and his family worked tirelessly to receive them all. Food had to be stored, not just for 8 human souls, but for every creature that would shelter within those gopherwood walls. Grain for the herbivores, meat for the carnivores, seeds for the new world that would emerge from the waters. The neighbors watched in amazement. Some perhaps began to wonder if old Noah might be right after all. The gathering of the animals was unprecedented, supernatural, undeniable. Yet still the majority scoffed. Still they continued in their eating and drinking, their marrying and giving in marriage, as if the normal patterns of life would continue forever. For yet 7 days, the Lord announced, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. 7 more days, one final week of grace, one last opportunity for repentance. Picture Noah during those final days, perhaps standing at the door of the ark, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what was coming. Did he call out one last time to his neighbors? Did he plead with them to reconsider? Did he weep for those who had rejected God's mercy? The Bible records that Noah did all that God commanded him. Every instruction was followed. Every detail was completed. And when the time came, Noah and his household entered the ark, along with all the creatures that God had sent to them. Then came the moment that sealed the fate of the antediluvian world, and the Lord shut him in. The door of the ark was not closed by human hands, but by divine hands. The same hands that had formed man from the dust now closed the door of mercy. The time of grace had ended. The season of judgment had begun. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. Feel the terror of that moment. The earth itself began to convulse. Deep beneath the ground, pressures that had been building for decades suddenly found release. The fountains of the great, deep, vast underground reservoirs of water burst forth with unimaginable force. The very foundations of the earth shook as geysers of water erupted from the ground like liquid mountains. Simultaneously, the windows of heaven opened. For the first time since creation, rain began to fall upon the earth. Not the gentle mist that had watered the ground since the beginning, but torrential downpours that turned the sky into a waterfall. Drops became streams, streams became rivers, rivers became oceans pouring from the heavens. Picture the panic that must have gripped the antediluvian world. The scoffers who had mocked Noah's preaching now understood too late the truth of his warnings. The violence that had filled the earth was now overwhelmed by the violence of divine judgment. The corruption that had covered the land was now being washed away by the cleansing waters of God's wrath. Some perhaps ran to higher ground, climbing hills and mountains, seeking escape from the rising waters. Others may have beat upon the sides of the ark, pleading for entrance, begging for mercy. But the door that God had shut could not be opened by human hands. The time for repentance had passed. Inside the ark, Noah and his family listened to the sounds of a world dying. The thundering of rain on the wooden roof above their heads. The groaning of the ark as it began to lift from the ground. The cries of those outside who had waited too long to seek salvation. Yet within that vessel of preservation, there was peace. God was with them. His presence filled every room, comforted every heart, and calmed every fear. The same God who had commanded the building of the ark now sustained those who sheltered within it. And the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. 40 the number of testing, of trial, of divine completion. For 40 days and 40 nights the heavens poured forth their judgment, while the earth expelled its hidden waters. Visualize the transformation of the world during those 40 days. The familiar landscape disappearing beneath the ever-rising flood. The hills becoming islands, then disappearing entirely. The mountains being swallowed by waters that seemed to have no end. And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. 15 cubits above the highest peaks. More than 20 feet of water, covering even Mount Ararat, the eventual resting place of the ark. The entire geography of the pre-flood world was erased, buried beneath the universal deluge. Cities were destroyed, civilizations were ended, and the wickedness that had grieved God's heart was finally cleansed from the earth. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl and of cattle, and of beast, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all that was in the dry land, died. The silence that followed the storm must have been profound. No more voices raised in violence, no more cries of corruption, no more sounds of a civilization that had forgotten its creator. Only the gentle lapping of waves against the sides of the ark, and the soft breathing of those whom God had chosen to preserve. For months the ark drifted upon the face of the waters. Picture this massive vessel, perhaps the largest wooden ship ever constructed, carrying its precious cargo across a world transformed into one vast ocean. No land was visible in any direction. No familiar landmarks remained. The ark had become the entire world for its 8 human inhabitants and their countless animal companions. Inside this floating sanctuary, life continued according to God's provision. The animals were fed and tended. The family maintained their routines of worship and work. Each day brought the same question. When would God remember them? When would the waters begin to recede? But God had not forgotten. And God remembered Noah, and every living thing, and all the cattle that was with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. Remember what a beautiful word in the context of judgment. God remembered his covenant. He remembered his mercy. He remembered his promise to preserve a remnant through the flood. And in his remembering, the process of restoration began. The fountains of the deep were stopped. The windows of heaven were closed. The rain ceased. And a wind, the same wind that had moved upon the face of the waters at creation, now moved to dry the flooded earth. Slowly, gradually, the waters began to recede. Day by day, the level dropped. Week by week, the earth began to emerge from its watery grave. And on the 17th day of the 7th month, exactly 5 months after the flood began, the ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. Though the ark had found its resting place, the earth was far from ready for habitation. Water still covered the surface of the ground. The tops of mountains would not be visible for another 2.5 months. Noah and his family would remain in the ark for over a year, a time of patient waiting, of trusting in God's timing, of learning the rhythms of divine restoration. Picture Noah during those long months of waiting. This man who had preached for 120 years now learned the lesson of silence. This builder who had worked tirelessly to construct the ark now learned the discipline of stillness. This faithful servant who had obeyed every command now learned to wait for the final word of release. 40 days after the mountaintops became visible, Noah opened the window of the ark and sent forth a raven. This black bird, a scavenger by nature, flew back and forth, finding sufficient carrion to sustain itself, but no dry ground for nesting. 7 days later, Noah sent forth a dove, a bird of peace, a creature that required fresh vegetation and clean water. The dove found no rest for the sole of her foot and returned to the ark. The earth was not yet ready for new life. 7 more days passed, and again Noah sent forth the dove. This time she returned in the evening with an olive leaf in her mouth. Fresh vegetation, new growth. The earth was coming back to life. Hope sprouted in the hearts of the ark, as inhabitants, like that tender olive branch in the dove's beak. Another 7 days, and the dove was sent forth once more. This time she did not return. She had found a place to make her nest, food to sustain her, and mates with whom to rebuild her species. The time of restoration had begun. And it came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. Picture that moment when Noah first glimpsed the new world. The same sun that had shone upon the antediluvian earth now illuminated a landscape washed clean. The same sky that had poured forth judgment now stretched blue and clear above the renewed earth. Everything was familiar, yet everything was different. But Noah did not immediately leave the ark. This man, who had learned perfect obedience during the building, waited for the divine command to disembark. For nearly 2 more months, he remained in the vessel of salvation until God spoke the word of release. Go forth of the ark, thou and thy wife, and thy sons wives with thee. Bring forth with thee every living thing that is with thee of all flesh, both of fowl and of cattle, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, that they may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful, and multiply upon the earth. And so began the great emergence. Picture the procession as it flowed from the ark, a second creation parade, a renewed march of life across the cleansed earth. The animals that had entered by 2s and 7s now emerged to fulfill their original mandate, to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Noah and his family stepped onto solid ground for the first time in over a year. Feel the earth beneath their feet firm, dry, stable. Breathe the air with them fresh, clean, washed by the rains of judgment and dried by the winds of grace. See the world through their eyes empty, yet full of potential, silent yet pregnant with promise. The first act of the new world's father was worship. And Noah builded an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast and of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. Picture this scene of grateful worship. The stones gathered and stacked with reverent hands, the fire kindled upon the altar, the smoke ascending toward heaven like a prayer made visible. Noah understood that their survival was not due to the soundness of the ark or the strength of their faith, but to the faithfulness of God. The offering of clean animals, those of which 7 pairs had been preserved, demonstrated Noah's trust in God as continued provision. He gave from his abundance, knowing that the God who had multiplied the animals in the ark could multiply them again upon the earth. And the Lord smelled the sweet savor. And the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more everything living as I have done. What profound theology is contained in that divine response. God acknowledged that human nature had not been changed by the flood. The imagination of man's heart was still evil from youth. Yet in his grace, he promised never again to destroy the earth by water. The next time judgment comes, it will be by fire, not flood. Then came the moment that sealed the new relationship between God and his creation. As clouds gathered in the sky, perhaps the first clouds Noah's family had seen since the flood, the sun broke through, and there in the heavens appeared something never before witnessed by human eyes. A rainbow, a bow of many colors spanning the sky like a bridge between earth and heaven. 7 colors blending into one magnificent arc, a symbol of diversity united, of beauty emerging from storm, of hope painted across the clouds. And God spake unto Noah, and to his sons with him, saying, And I, behold, I establish my covenant with you, and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, of the cattle, and of every beast of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark, to every beast of the earth. The covenant was not just with humanity, but with all of creation. Every sparrow that sang in the new world, every lamb that grazed in the fresh pastures, every tree that took root in the cleansed soil, all were included in God's promise of preservation. And I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood, neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth. Never again. Those two words carried the weight of divine commitment across all future generations. Never again would the fountains of the great deep break up. Never again would the windows of heaven open in judgment. Never again would the earth be baptized in the waters of universal destruction. And God said, "This is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you, for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth." The rainbow God's bow set in the clouds like a warrior laying down his weapons. The very instrument that could have been used for destruction transformed into a symbol of mercy. Every time storm clouds gather and the rain begins to fall, the rainbow appears to remind both God and man of the covenant of preservation. And it shall come to pass, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the waters shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. Even God, in his infinite memory, chose to use the rainbow as a reminder of his promise, not because he might forget, but because visible tokens strengthen faith and demonstrate the certainty of divine commitment. And so ends the epic of the flood, yet so begins the eternal story of God's covenant faithfulness. From that day to this, whenever storm clouds gather and rain begins to fall, the rainbow appears in the sky as a reminder of divine mercy triumphing over judgment. The ark that preserved 8 souls has become a symbol for all who seek salvation. Just as Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord and was saved through water, so all who call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Just as there was one door into the ark, so there is one door into eternal life. The waters that destroyed the wicked world also lifted the ark to safety. The same storms that brought judgment to some brought salvation to others. The difference was not in the storm, but in the shelter. The difference was not in the worthiness of those who were saved, but in the grace of the one who provided salvation. Noah walked with God before the flood, and he walked with God after the flood. Through catastrophe and calm, through judgment and mercy, through the old world and the new, his relationship with his Creator remained constant. In a world that changes like shifting sand, this is the anchor of hope, that God remains the same yesterday, today, and forever. Tonight, as you rest in the safety of your own shelter, remember the ark that rode safely upon the waters of divine judgment. Remember the rainbow that still appears in the clouds as a token of God's faithfulness. Remember that the same God who preserved Noah and his family is watching over you with the same covenant love. The sounds of rain may fall upon your roof, but they speak not of judgment, but of blessing. The storms of life may rage around you, but you are held secure in the ark of God's grace. The floods of trouble may rise, but they cannot reach those who are hidden in the shelter of the Most High. Rest now in the peace of the covenant. Sleep in the assurance of divine faithfulness. Dream of the rainbow that spans the sky as a bridge between earth and heaven, a reminder that mercy rejoices against judgment, that love is stronger than death, that God's promises endure forever. For just as the waters of the flood have long since dried, and just as the new world emerged from the old, so every storm in your life will pass, and new mercies will dawn with each morning's light. The God who shut Noah safely in the ark will keep you safely in his love, now and always, world without end. Let the gentle lapping of waves against the sides of the ark lull you to peaceful rest. Let the cooing of doves and the whisper of wind in olive branches sing you to sleep. For you are safe in the covenant of grace, protected in the ark of divine love, and covered by the rainbow of eternal promise. The epic is ended, but the story continues. Noah's covenant has become your covenant. His salvation has become your salvation. His God has become your God. And the same voice that called to Noah in the antediluvian world is calling to you now. Come into the ark. Enter the place of safety. Rest in the shelter of my love. Sleep now, child of the covenant. Rest in the rainbow's promise. Dream of the dove returning with the olive branch, carrying the hope of new beginnings, new mercies, new life emerging from the waters of grace. For tomorrow's sun will rise upon a world washed clean, and you will walk with God just as faithful Noah walked with him, in the light of divine favor, under the arch of the eternal covenant, safe forevermore in the Ark of Salvation. The flood is over. The rainbow shines. The covenant endures. And you are loved with an everlasting love that will never let you go.